Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Amar's Curiosity of Being. Thank you for stopping by. I'm actually in Latin America at the moment. Came here last week with my family, and I'm excited to be doing this podcast with you guys. I actually recorded a podcast you're about to see about 3 weeks ago. And so today, you guys get to hear it. Meditation has been around for thousands of years, and Transcendental Meditation was made famous, at least for me, in the 60s when the Beatles started meditating and specifically doing Transcendental Meditation. I got involved with this about 3 years ago, and I'm so grateful for the peace it has brought me, and it continues to get better and better each day. And so today you guys will be hearing from my teacher, Mr. David Shaw. He's the one that taught me Transcendental Meditation. And so if you guys are ready, let's jump on in. Thanks for being here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, and I just muted myself.
Good. How's it going?
Very well, thank you.
Is that a picture of Maharishi behind you?
Yes, that's a painting. I was going to ask you if this was appropriate. I didn't even think until I came into this room. This is where I take most of my Zoom calls, but once that I'm doing a class on Zoom or something like that. But then I realized, is this appropriate?
Listen, I don't understand. Appropriate for who? Like for me, I'm fine.
Yes, for you, I'm sure. For your audience, would it? Because we're doing this as a podcast, but you said you also wanted to.
Well, I'm going to be as nice as possible, David. These are crazy times we live in, and because this is my podcast, I don't give a fuck. That'll be the only hard word I use for the rest of this podcast.
Okay.
No, all kidding aside, no, absolutely not. I mean, I am, my podcast is called Amar's Curiosity of Being, and I'm open to listening to everything. This is a crazy world. I woke up to this world, it seems, to, just last year, to all these rules and this and that and all this nonsense. But no, to answer your question, that was a long answer. No, everything goes here. If there's something that is inappropriate for you, you're my guest. By all means, I will respect, but no, from my point of view, David, everything goes.
Because I was thinking this as a podcast, as audio primarily, but then I remembered you said you wanted to have this on Zoom so that you could have the video version as well.
That's right.
I thought, oh, would this scare some of your viewers off or whatnot? But I don't mind it. Personally, I don't mind being there. And whenever I teach, anytime I'm representing this knowledge, I almost always have some image, a picture, even if it's a picture, that I use for the ceremony and whatnot, to represent the tradition, because this is not my stuff.
Yeah, got you.
The Vedic tradition, and I need to pay homage to it and make sure that that part of the message exists as well, that this is not David Shaw's Transcendental Meditation Toronto version 3.0 or something, right?
That's right. Got you.
Something that is universal and global, and you learn TM anywhere.
That's right.
With any TM teacher, certified TM teacher, it's the same consistent, high quality teaching and technique and experience.
That's right. Exactly. Well said. But do people have an issue with now that you've brought it up? Do people have an issue with the picture, or like what was the what?
Well, there's two perspectives. One is perhaps even an internal one, as well as an external one. Are we on now, actually?
Yes. Oh, yeah, this is it.
I thought this was the prep. I wasn't sure.
No prep. Just two people, having a great conversation.
And this works for me, indeed.
Yeah.
And I speak as a teacher of Transcendental Meditation, representing this Vedic tradition, which I received and was trained and certified by my teacher. In that image behind me, a painting done by a fellow teacher of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who received it from his teacher, the image that I showed you just a moment ago, like this, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati.
So that was Maharishi's teacher that you're showing.
Yes,
okay,
indeed.
Gotcha.
And he received the knowledge from his teacher, Swami Krishnanand Saraswati, and so forth, going back thousands of years in this Vedic tradition, this actually oral tradition. And I emphasize that it's an oral tradition because this is how you learn. When you learn TM or anyone else learn TM.
What's oral? You mean orally?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Spoken.
Okay.
And this oral tradition has been maintained for thousands of years. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a written language. It was actually intentionally maintained orally as opposed to in writing, literally. Because there is a whole quality of sound and form. There's a whole quality that is associated with oral transmission of knowledge, which is more tacit than it is codified. It is codified, but it's also tacit transfer of knowledge. And today's day and age.
What do you mean by, sorry, you lost me there. What do you mean?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, that's why we're doing this. What does it mean by tacit?
Well, there's information and knowledge that, we receive like over the internet, on our smartphones and so forth, which is codified, factual, zeros and ones, yes and no, up and down, and so forth, and categorized and so forth.
That's more digital though, right?
Yeah.
Zeros and okay.
But that's the world that we live in.
Got you.
Everybody thinks that that's the only way, or that's the superior way of transmitting knowledge. But right now, what we're doing is in fact a reflection of that oral tradition. It's a conversation. It's a flow of consciousness between two human beings, from one consciousness to another and in between. And there's a whole lot that can be learned that way, as opposed to in a codified manner. I suppose the way I would analogize it, and we're already sort of off topic of TM, but not off topic, it's really about teaching, the philosophy of teaching, is that if you want to study, I don't know, physics or something like that, theoretical physics. So you're working on a whiteboard and numbers and math and this and that and whatnot. And it can be taught through a book and that sort of thing, mathematics. But if you want to become a master stonemason, how do you learn that? Do you go open a book and do you just go onto a bunch of YouTube videos and say, oh, look, this is how I, sculpt something out of sandstone or out of granite or out of, marble or whatnot? Or do you actually apprentice?
That's right.
You work with a master stonemason and he teaches you the basics and you do it. There's a lot of doing in the learning process. And that relationship between the stonemason and the apprentice is, in fact, a relationship where there's a tacit transfer of knowledge, meaning that understanding is exchanged based upon the experience of the learner.
Gotcha.
And so it's step by step and step, and it might be different with this apprentice and this apprentice and this apprentice. And the stonemason may say, oh, you're chipping it and you want to shape a belly onto a piece of granite for the stone wall or something as an accent piece. And you keep chipping away and you just can't get that shape. Stonemason might say, okay, now hold your chisel at this angle. And you bang away at this angle. You still don't get that piece breaking off the right way. Just hold it like this, but a little bit looser. And when you strike only with this much. And you do it a few times, you still don't get it. But then after a while, and he's helping you adjust your technique and your understanding until you actually are able to master the craft and yourself become a master stonemason. That whole art of learning through apprenticeship and tacit transfer of knowledge is largely lost in this digital age because we have this fascination with the digital, and codified. And the tragedy of it all also is that there's so much misinformation provided that way.
That's right.
So when we teach Transcendental Meditation, we say we teach this technique, this knowledge, from an oral tradition. And that oral tradition is called the Vedic tradition.
Okay.
And the word Vedic in Sanskrit comes from the root word in Sanskrit, Veda. I'm overemphasizing the da.
Yeah.
It's more Veda,
Yeah.
Sada,
That's right.
Ved, which means knowledge. And that in turn comes from the root word in Sanskrit, which is vid, which means to know. So this technique of Transcendental Meditation comes from the tradition of knowledge. To know what? Implicitly and explicitly, it means to know the self. And implicitly, to know the self is the foundation or the basis of being able to know anything else in its truth. If we don't know the self, if the consciousness is not clear and centered and established and pure, then everything that we perceive and cognize is colored. It's colored by that lack of knowledge of the self. So this whole technique of Transcendental Meditation is the technique of knowing the self first.
Gotcha.
By establishing oneself within our own eternal, immortal, non-changing state of consciousness, then it's possible to enjoy and know everything else in its full potential, in its truth. So the technique is for that purpose.
Gotcha.
It has a lot of other benefits. I'll call them secondary or ancillary benefits. There's lots of those. And in the popular media, sometimes what TM actually is, and I say this as a person in the marketing communications profession, as opposed to as a TM teacher, is that the brand image and the brand identity may be two different things. And the brand identity is what I described to you in this understanding of Vedic and Ved and Vid, to know the self, sometimes is lost in the way popular media speaks of TM as a technique to get rid of stress.
That's right.
And that dominates. And that's true. It's incredibly effective and powerful and rudimentary in maintaining our mental and physical health, but that's not all it is.
First cause is self-awareness.
Yes, exactly. And that's foundational. But, in popular media, it's more seen, the brand quote image is, it's a technique to sit quietly and still the mind and all that kind of stuff, which
it's simplified.
Yeah, in a way that most people can relate to, and sometimes comes with a bit of unfortunate baggage, as you've seen images, not just of TM, but any form of meditation, but it also tends to be used by photographers and websites and magazine people. You see a person sitting there, sort of sitting there in a half lotus or full lotus or cross-legged and holding their fingers like this.
That's right.
And you don't sit like that to meditate.
No.
Not even Maharshi or his teacher sits like that to meditate. That's a fabricated image.
It's funny though. My grandfather, that's my first experience with meditating when I was young. I'm talking, from the time I can remember, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And that's how he sat. But he was a yogi as well. So he would meditate and he would do yoga.
His yoga asanas, and you have to train the body to be able to do it. I'm not saying there's no value to it. There is, from a health perspective, from a posture perspective.
But that's not what TM is, basically. That's what you're saying.
It's not necessary.
Gotcha.
In fact, it can be a detraction, because the whole process of TM, as you know from your experience, is this experience of going inward, experiencing thought at a subtler and subtler and subtler and subtler level until we transcend, go beyond the subtlest level of the thought process, and just experience pure being. Not thinking, not speaking, not doing, just being. Which means the awareness is going inward to the self, that non-changing self. And if it's going inward, by definition, it means it's leaving the outward expression of life. The awareness, first of all, leaves the environment because we close the senses. We sit. We don't have to sit in a perfectly quiet place, but we prefer to sit in a place where there isn't music or something actively going on that the mind.
I actually use earplugs because I've got a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. So I use the earplugs to, mute them, and it really helps.
Yeah, because where's the awareness going when there's stimulus? It goes to the stimulus, right?
That's right.
And if your 2-year-old and your 7-year-old, which is stimulus, and fortunately, as dad, you're hardwired to immediately go there.
That's right. And you've got a monkey mind that wants to go see what's happening over there.
It's hardwired. Otherwise, we couldn't raise children.
That's right.
It was, I'm going to meditate or something like that, and to completely ignore the infant crying. Well, no, you actually feel agitated.
Yeah.
You feel, it's not just any sound. That's your child's crying. So, of course, the awareness goes outward. So through the 5 senses, the awareness is directed outward and connected to the environment. When we practice TM, we're actually withdrawing from the environment, if you will, and the awareness goes inward. We sit to meditate with our eyes closed. We don't sit and do TM with our eyes open. We sit in a relatively quiet place as comfortably as we can. And so when we sit, posture isn't all that important, so long as we're in a relatively upright position with back support. And that's essential for most of us, unless it's your grandfather who practiced yoga, asana, hatha yoga.
That's right.
For decades, and can sit comfortably with no back support. The rest of us simply can't.
That's right.
And if you cannot do it comfortably, then when you close your eyes to meditate, where's your awareness? It's outward to the body, to maintaining balance and posture, which prevents us from going inward.
That's right.
So all we have to do is sit comfortably, eyes closed. We don't put on any, natural sounds like a babbling brook or birds tweeting. We don't need that. We don't need stimulus.
That's right.
We just close ourselves to that by closing our eyes and sitting comfortably. And, you said use earplugs or headphones. That's okay.
Actually, it's earplugs that goes directly, in the ear. Yeah.
It doesn't, so long as it doesn't close you off entirely to the environment, right? That's important, because when we sit to meditate, we transcend the sensory input, but sound is really important to our existence.
Gotcha.
Right? So when you're sitting to meditate, your wife is taking care of the kids, and that's fine. So you sit to meditate. So you don't want to or need to hear all those, those stimuli and distraction. But if somebody said fire,
yeah,
you need to hear that. You need to get up and leave your meditation, right?
Yeah. Well, for me, the earplugs that I use, you can actually hear it. What all it does, it takes away the spikes that, because I have a 2.5-year-old son, and when he screams, it's very jarring, right? So if there was a fire, I would definitely hear it, but it just eliminates all the spikes.
Right. But when somebody yells fire, or the fire alarm goes off, then you're able to hear it. And that's why we say to people, well, if it's not necessary, don't get into the habit of using earplugs or headphones. If you're on a noisy airplane, maybe, if you're, meditating at home and you have a toddler, maybe. If there's a jackhammer your neighbor's using to build a shed on top of his driveway or something, then that meditation, you might want to put the headphones on.
Yeah, gotcha.
So what we teach is a technique that allows the mind to go inward very naturally.
Great. And it's that inwardness if I may add to what you're saying, is extremely powerful. When I started out, I had neck pains. Speaking of sitting properly, and I don't know when that disappeared, but it was shortly after the neck pain just went away, and I don't get neck pains anymore. It might have been the chair I was sitting on when I first started as well, but now I'm able to sit on any chair, anywhere, and I can go in the zone, and it is the most beautiful feeling when you go into that zone of nothingness. And
Mhm.
and if I go out of that zone, I just get back to the mantra, right? As and you can talk more about that after, but yeah, I'm addicted to that feeling. And I know you mentioned that we should only do it twice a day, 15 to 20 minutes a day, because we have to we're still existing in the third dimension, so to speak, and we still need to function, and not necessarily go spend all this time in there. And you can talk more
Yeah.
about that.
Well, you have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, so
That's
you have
right.
that responsibility.
That's right. So what are some of the benefits, David? I mean, and these are questions you've already answered, yeah, to me, because I've done the course and so on. But I would love for you to speak about the benefits, and who does this. Because I know the Beatles have done this. People like Hugh Jackman, Jerry Seinfeld, David Lynch and he actually has a foundation. So if you can talk about that, that would be awesome.
Well, it's hard to say specifically this or that person or this or that demographic or cohort are practitioners of TM. Millions of people have learned the practice of TM, and they come from every walk of life, from every age group, from every corner of the earth. It's
from every religion as well,
from,
because this is
from
not a
yeah,
religion.
from every religion, from every cultural background. In fact, sometimes people ask that question about TM and compatibility with one's cultural religious background, and I say it's quite independent. In fact, if you do have a cultural background, a religious background, that sort of thing, it may very well help you connect much more deeply with it.
In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, the head of the new head, because Maharishi passed away a few years back, the new head is Lebanese. He's a doctor.
Yes,
And he's Christian. Am I correct?
That's what I understand.
Okay.
Well, certainly
Or
his
was born a
background.
Christian, or
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, he's of Lebanese background. He's a medical doctor. He has a PhD in physiology. So he's definitely a man of science, and he's a man of the West, if you will, because of his science and his upbringing and so forth. But ethnically and where he was born, it was the Middle East. So it's, he himself kind of spans the range. I have friends that learn the practice of TM who were, I'll say decidedly secular when they were young and started the practice of TM. And my roommate back in the 80s eventually found his way to divinity school and became a Anglican priest.
After doing meditation?
Wow. Teaching, and actually he was a TM teacher as well for quite a number of years, and taught in Africa as well as in North America. Another friend, actually a couple of them, ethnically Jewish, very secular. A couple of them became rabbis.
Wow.
Yeah. Another young lady, originally from Hong Kong, also TM teacher. These are all friends who are also TM teachers. Mm-hmm. Found her way back to her upbringing, a Buddhist upbringing, and after teaching in Hong Kong, teaching here in Canada, she returned to Hong Kong and ended up becoming a Buddhist nun. So people of every background, every religion, Muslims in the Sunni tradition and the Shia tradition practice TM,
and you mentioned sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned the Buddha. His meditation was different than TM, and how does it compare, like TM versus other meditations?
Well, that's a good question, Amar. It's we're speaking somewhat in generalities here now. Okay, in the teaching of the Buddha, Gautama Siddhartha Gautama, like that, is a technique of meditation now being sort of distilled or sanitized down into what some people call mindfulness and that sort of thing, is about bringing the awareness to a point value into, oftentimes referred to as the now or the moment. And it's a technique that is, the technique itself, the goal is same. The technique and the path to get there is different. It is largely, as the way it's been understood, interpreted over the last couple of thousand years, a path of renunciation, a path of negation. And the technique is essentially using the mind in a fashion to say no, 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 reject, 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 renunciate, 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 in order to arrive at that experience you referred to as that grand nothingness. You can negate your way there through a technique and a philosophy and a teaching, or you can get there maybe even further through a technique and a teaching that is accepting and embracing.
And that's that's what I love about TM.
Yeah.
Before doing TM, and I never really had anyone teach me any other type of TM anyway. And, I'm sure they're all good. As you mentioned, they're different paths to get to self-awareness. But what I love about TM is that mantra really helps you to, you're not fighting those thoughts or rejecting the thoughts. You're just, rather than rejecting, you're just embracing your mantra.
You're just accepting.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not a mantra meditation the way some people do think of it, where you focus on the mantra and you use it to beat up like a baseball bat to beat up other thoughts. You're just accepting. And there's a mantra and there's a way of utilizing the mantra that we define as transcendental meditation. And the name of the technique probably says it all. Transcendental meditation. Meditation meaning deep thought. We use the term meditation. It kind of technically means just thought or thinking. But when we use the word meditation, we're referring to something more subtle or more profound or more focused. And so there's many different types of meditation. Transcendental meditation is a very specific practice, a very specific technique. And the word transcendental says it all. And I'd like to, clarify that understanding. Transcendental means beyond. So this technique, interestingly enough, is a technique of going beyond meditation itself.
Gotcha.
And it's important to understand it as beyond, as opposed to without. The misunderstanding, or the understanding in some other traditions and teachings, is that the notion is to be without. So if I said, here's my cell phone and here's my glasses, and I were to position them, the glasses are beyond the iPhone. It doesn't negate the cell phone. Beyond does not mean without.
That's right.
Without means I have to annihilate this, remove it, and there is the glasses without the smartphone. Transcendental means beyond, so it can coexist. The two can coexist. So the technique of transcendental meditation, in that sense, is fundamentally different from most other forms of meditation, where the attempt is to achieve that state through negation, to pushing something away. Whereas our technique is simply embracing the technique, not the experience of that wholeness or that nothingness, however you want to describe it, but just embracing the technique. And the technique just allows the mind to naturally go there. And it's it's paradoxical. It's kind of
But that,
ironic.
but that paradox is what really helped me, because
Yeah,
I remember
exactly.
when I did the course, and I remember saying, I have all these thoughts.
Excuse me.
Yeah, bless you. I have you mentioned that. Sorry, I mentioned to you that I had all these thoughts as I was trying to meditate, and you mentioned in the course that that's okay. That is part of meditating. Just be with that, all those thoughts, and go back to your mantra gently, and just be with it. And that's what ultimately helped me to become a better TM practitioner.
Yes, because the opposite of that instruction, or the opposite of that approach, would be get rid of those extraneous thoughts. Well, it requires a thought to think about getting rid of thoughts.
That's right.
What have you done? Right? You're now in this vicious cycle of beating yourself up. We just, in our practice of TM, use the mantra in a very particular way, that you would receive during the course of instruction. That gives us that insight. That in the word you're using is right. It's a paradox. We're using activity to go beyond activity. We're not pretending that there's no activity. We're not trying to make a mood that there's no activity. We use activity, the technique, and the mantra, which, oddly enough, if you pause for a moment, say, what's a mantra? Wait a second. It's also a thought.
Mm-hmm.
It's a specific thought. It's a specific sound. It's not a word. And we make that very clear that we use a mantra, which is a thought, not a word, because a word has sound value and it has
Meaning.
a value.
That's right.
Our mantra has a sound value and doesn't need to have a meaning value. And that's advantageous for us because the sound keeps the mind lively without a direction. A word keeps the mind lively, but with a specific direction. You say pencil, you hear sound value, pencil, but you think of something like this, thereabouts, and it directs the mind. Oh, pencil, sharpen, unsharpen, with an eraser, without an eraser, what is this? An HB or a 2B or whatever kind of lead. So it has this engagement on the horizontal plane of meaning.
So what does this ultimately, what does this do, David? Like the health benefits, if someone who's never meditated before, what are some of the benefits? And like I said, I know how I feel, but just for our audience, what would be some of them you would mention?
Well, one of the first things is peace of mind, a mental health perspective. And that's something everybody wants, needs, seeks in, particularly these times, great uncertainty and turmoil and whatnot. We just need that quietude, that silence, that settledness within ourselves, because it's an essential part of life. And we are living in a period of time where we are overstimulated. And, there's a constant demand for our attention, our awareness. That's what the digital industry is really all about. The information industry is all about. That's what Facebook is about. That's what Google is about. That's what all these things are about. It's about getting a slice of your attention and then directing or doing something to that. So people work, for days, weeks, months, years, entire teams of people with PhDs and so on and so forth, great geniuses, to grab a slice of your attention, to stimulate it, to make you want something. And that creates this constant dissatisfaction, constant excessive stimulus. Rewarding to some extent, no doubt, right? You go, oh, I just got a text. Who's that? Oh, it's Amar. Oh, I just got, what's this? Oh, I just, and you get these little hits, these little endorphin hits, and you get addicted to all that stimulus, and you're not able to have a more settled mind, a peace of mind, a degree of contentment, mental and emotional contentment. So the first thing is that this technique is a mental technique. It's not a physical technique. You don't physically do exercises or this or that. It's not actually an emotional practice like a devotional practice or something. It's a mental technique. It's not an intellectual exploration. It's purely just of the mind. And that settling of the mind brings us to this state of profound silence, as you called it, nothingness. And also paradoxically, you probably wouldn't disagree with me that you could just as easily say you settle into that silence, into that state that you love, that on one hand you describe as complete nothingness, but also it's the field of all possibilities.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's whole, it's complete, it's not lacking.
It's everything and it's nothing all at the same time.
Exactly, all at the same time. And that's a beautiful, profound experience. That
it's infinity, going from one extreme to the other. Yeah,
it's lovely, isn't it? It's just such a lovely.
Well, that's why I said I never want to come out when I'm, there are a few times when I'm in there and I'm just happy to be out because I've just got craziness going into my mind. I'm having a tough time settling down, and thank God that only happens once in a while now. But yeah, it's a beautiful.
As you go along, and it's been a couple of years since you've been practicing TM now.
Yes. Yeah, it's been 2.5 years.
Yeah. Well, the next step of your experience and growth will be where instead of thinking about it, and it's probably starting to happen already, you haven't quite intellectually framed it that way yet in your own mind, is that you go into this experience and then you say, I don't want to leave, and then you leave and you come out and you engage in activity and so on and so forth. But sometimes you probably have noticed that you go into this experience and there is no mantras, there's no thoughts, there's nothing, yet it's everything. And then you come out of that experience, so to speak, you finish your meditation and you engage with your family and activity. And wait, you're still there, but you're not there, but you're there while you're in the activity. That's the purpose of this practice. There's a technique in this practice, and that's why we say twice a day, 20 minutes twice a day like this, because the objective is not to go there and stay there. Because you have a life, you have an individuality, you have a wife, you have children, you have all that. You actually want to go there to bring that quality of experience and consciousness.
Live with those benefits.
Exactly. To live with that quality of consciousness. I think that's the first most fundamental benefit, and everything else is kind of a derivative of that.
And I was reading something about military or war vets, where they did a study with that had PSD, and they saw a huge. Maybe you can talk about that a bit.
Yeah, that's that post-traumatic stress disorder. I've been teaching TM for almost 50 years, and I've taught lots of people who have been.
Did you say 50? 50?
Yeah, almost 5.
Wow.
7 years now. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, go on. Sorry. Yeah.
It's a long time, I know. Your young listeners may be a little freaked out.
Well, I'm trying to look at you and go, how old is this guy? Because 50 years. Anyway, go on.
Well, most of my colleagues are this cohort. We're that group that found this technique in our lives, thanks to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and bringing it forth and bringing it out of the Himalayas in northern India to the world, and immediately sort of jumped on board and say, yes, we want to share this. And so we trained to become teachers, and some of us were trained at probably too young of an age, like myself. I just rushed off and straight out of high school, right after graduation, to go and study with Maharishi to be able to teach this technique, which I learned while I was in high school and thought this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. In fact, when I learned, that experience was so obvious and demonstrable in my first sitting of TM. And I had been doing other techniques and other practices of martial arts and Tai Chi and Zen meditation and whatnot, and didn't quite find this. I learned TM and go, oh, this is what I'm looking for. And this is the experience, the same that you described. And the week after I learned, I sat down with the instructor in my first follow-up class a week later and said, I'd like to, go through the process to be trained to teach Transcendental Meditation and so forth and so forth. And I was so enthusiastic explaining this to him. And he looked at me and said, well, that's great. Don't you think you should finish high school first? So I finished high school and went off to study with Maharishi to be able to share this technique that is so profound in its simplicity, in its innocence, and so effective in dealing with the stresses and, for some people, the traumas in life. And those traumas, whether you want to speak as a small stress or a giant trauma, like someone might suffer PTSD from an abusive relationship or from a war zone or whatnot, they are like impressions in the mind. They are impressions in the consciousness that limits and restricts us and creates this closed loop of experience and memory and limitations of choice and so forth. So PTSD, it's that post-traumatic stress disorder. It's when the senses, the experience through the senses, because that's how we engage the world, through the senses, is overwhelmed. I mean, when somebody takes a flash picture of you, your eyesight, the mechanics of sight is overwhelmed and you don't see for a moment, right, from that flash. If you're at a rock concert and you're pushing too hard to get close to the stage, too near those giant bass speakers for 2.5 hours pounding away at you, overwhelms the sense of hearing like that. That's on the mechanics. And then there's at the brain level where those experiences can be so intense, it's as if it etches, scars the brain in a sense of pathways and whatnot.
And we all have scars, right? Some are just larger than others, yeah. Right?
And some of them are just good things because they're training the brain to do certain positive things to life. Yeah. But the ones that are negative is like, if I have this, my table here, and I use a chisel and I put a big scar down the middle of the table, well, I've damaged the surface of the table. And if I pour a handful of marbles on the table and they rolled around the table a little bit, where would they end up? They'd end up trapped in that scar.
Yeah.
And they're trapped in the scar, and unfortunately makes it worse. It doesn't go anywhere except in the scar. And so these marbles are rolling around the scar, and it makes it deeper and deeper and deeper, and less freedom for the marbles to roll around the table. Our mind can be like that. Impressions can be like that. And trauma is much like that. The physical hurt may have passed. The physical hurt may have been healed, but the impression and the consciousness has not. And that person is trapped in that loop. And they hear a loud bang, and they think it's improvised explosive. But it isn't. It's just somebody dropped a plate or a motorcycle, sort of loud backfire or something. But immediately the body goes into this fight or flight response because of that. And you can deal with it at some surface level. You can deal with it through medication. You can deal with it through cognitive behavioral therapy. You can deal with it through medications and pharmaceuticals. But you can also deal with it through the practice of transcendental meditation to erase those impressions. And not just erase the impressions, but to soften the material, if you will, so that there's more resilience. So imagine that this scar on the table. And if we're talking about trauma and TM and whatnot, the scar on the table would be one thing, that the marbles are trapped in them. what would we do? Well, we'd say, okay, let me get a sanding block and smooth the whole thing out. And with, you know, a good deal of effort, I can smooth it out, and there's no more scar on the table. Now the marbles roll around freely. But the table can be easily scarred again, because that surface, that material is such that it takes an impression and keeps it. Now imagine for a moment, I mean, it's a silly notion of changing the surface of my table, but let's say, the limits of the metaphor here, imagine that the surface, I could change it somehow through maybe some sound vibration, through something. And instead of being a hard surface, it becomes, let's say, like a surface covered with an inch of sand or something, fine sand. And if I draw a line and create an impression in that sand, there it is, clearly that impression. But with just the simple passage of time, simple erosion, it all just smooths itself out again. And there's
That's right.
Smooth surface. Well, we can take it a little further. What if it were more like Jello? So the surface had this sort of gelatinous, thick gelatinous nature. I draw a line, and there it is. And as I go along, you can see it collapsing on itself. It doesn't leave a permanent impression. And then imagine if it's just a thin liquid. I draw a line, there is no line. I keep moving my finger through that. There's the experience, but it doesn't leave a lasting impression. Now, you could change the material as well as remove the impression. That's what transcendental meditation can do. It's not just dealing with it on an intellectual cognitive basis. That's just a loud bang. That's not an explosive in a war zone or whatnot. But we can also culture and cultivate more resilience, flexibility, adaptability within our physiology.
And that's just a matter of time, because the more you do it, and that's how I feel, from a year ago, to where I am now, it's amazing that I can go deeper and be more relaxed, and I'm able to get into that zone even faster now, and so on.
And when you come out, and that's the important thing, when you come out and you engage the world, the things that were stressful are just things.
That's right.
You go, okay, yeah, well, that's, that wasn't very nice, when that guy cut me off on the highway. But instead of my heart, palpitating and my middle finger wanting to stand up, the instinct to hunt him down and cut him off.
That's right.
You just go, what a goof.
And just move on.
You just move on, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't leave a lasting impression. And the power of this technique is in terms of the nature of the mind itself, that we learn how to use the nature of the mind in a very natural and effortless way, but also the nature of the quality of the sound that's used, the mantra, because the sound quality can help change that material quality. I mean, it sounds fantastical when people hear about it who don't practice TM.
That's right.
But then anybody who practices TM goes, yeah, when I learned, they gave me a very specific mantra that's mine.
And the mantras are unique to each.
Well, there's not 7 billion.
Okay.
Teachers can't remember 7 billion.
That's right.
Maybe Maharishi could, but we use.
So you don't create new ones every time.
No, actually, these sounds, these mantras, come from this Vedic tradition, and they've been handed down through generation upon generation upon generation of teachers, and they have a known effect. Like every sound has some kind of effect, right? So, baby crying would create, some degree of anxiety in most adults, and particularly in the parent. The chalk on a chalkboard, I presume most people still remember what a chalkboard is. Mm-hmm. That squeaky sound can be so, irritating. It just causes us to have this reflex.
You cringe. Yeah.
the story, I've never seen it, but you keep hearing about these opera singers who can
Yeah,
note and shatter a crystal vase or something like that
that's right.
on the side of the room. Well, sound, vibration, it's energy, and that frequency can do all sorts of things. I mean, we all, practically everybody who's listening is probably will use sound, if you will, a vibration, a frequency, to cook their food,
Yeah,
to reheat their food in a microwave, right?
that's right.
And change the
So even
material.
though you're not using, sorry to interrupt, but even though you're not using the sound, because it's not really, it's not coming out of your
It's not
mouth. You're
spoken.
doing, yeah, you're doing it internally.
Yes,
The
yes,
mind, the mind is making the sound, so
yes,
to speak.
yes.
Gotcha.
It's in the mind. It's not spoken. It's not auditory. It's not necessary. We go beyond that. We go into a much more subtle level right away. So you could, the power of this combination of the nature of the mind, the technique, and these particular mantras is so powerful in that it's like, if you look at your microwave, you can take an object like that's really hard and not particularly resilient, like an ice cube, something that you could put a scar on, then it looks kind of permanent in the ice. You put that into your microwave, you close the door, and you press a few buttons, and there's a wave of energy. It's like a sound, a microwave, and it changes the ice into water. It's still H2O. It's
That's
still, excuse me, it's still that molecular compound, but now its expression is different. It's now in the form of a liquid, which is much more flexible, resilient, and whatnot. Now, if you keep stimulating it with that sound, that microwave, that frequency, then it becomes more agitated, and then it becomes steam.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely resilient and flexible and so forth.
So how did TM manage to get? Because I read another article with inmates participating in doing transcendental meditation, and it just seems so out of the box for an inmate to get involved with something like this. How did that happen?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure.
But am I correct? There
Yeah,
has
we've taught. I've taught. I've done follow-up classes with people in prison. It's unfortunate. Their incarceration is for the result of some behavior, some aberrant behavior on their part. You can blame society, you can blame their DNA, you can blame. It doesn't matter. They're there,
yeah.
and we'll teach them to meditate so that they can find that inner peace and silence and freedom within themselves. In fact, the programs that we've done, particularly in the US in prisons, one of the oft repeated descriptions by some of these inmates, in some cases, people who are lifers, multiple life sentences, that sort of thing, after they learn TM, one of the things they would describe is it's the first time in their life they ever felt free.
Wow.
Because that freedom is not about this outside, it's about this inside. And that's the basis of in many cases their rehabilitation. Now,
I guess you're not truly free unless you're free on the inside.
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't mean that you learn TM when you get out of prison. It may not happen depending on your past behaviors and whatnot. But at least the person has that, and they have a chance. They have the opportunity to correct on that most foundational level their own existence, their own being, their own feelings, their own thoughts, and their own behavior. So it's very powerful, and we wouldn't deny this teaching, this technique, to anyone. In fact, when we teach someone the technique of transcendental meditation, as you recall, we teach it in this very lovely, traditional, ancient way, We always pay homage. We respect the teaching lineage. And I, as instructor, when you came to learn, perform this little ceremony to remind myself that it's not me, it's not my mantras, it's not my technique, it's not my teaching. I'm just passing this on. And I remind myself of that by looking at the lineage. Most people could relate to it if they've ever studied martial arts.
That's right.
Martial arts. You walk into a kung fu studio or a karate dojo or something like that, and there's always an instructor in person in front of you, not a YouTube video, but an instructor, a live person, and that instructor is standing to give class, but he always bows to his teacher and the lineage of his teacher, because behind him would be the picture of his teacher, and beside that was the teacher's teacher and the teacher's teacher, like that.
Well, it's no different paying homage. Sorry to interrupt. There's no different paying homage to your father or your grandfather or your great grandfather, right? Because they've been there to help you along the way.
Exactly, and that's something that I think got lost a little bit along the way over the last decades, but it's actually starting to become more revived in recognizing that homage, or you want to say veneration or whatnot, or just simply the word respect. So in that little ceremony that we perform, one of the first phrases, one of the first verses in that little ceremony that we perform says, whether pure or impure, whoever comes to this knowledge becomes purified. So in this teaching, we don't pass judgment on anybody coming to learn. They choose to learn, they want to learn. We will share this knowledge with them, regardless of their past, whether they are a victim of trauma in an abusive relationship, or in their duty as a soldier or something, or if they are in prison on multiple life sentences for doing unspeakable things. If they want this knowledge and this teaching, we share this knowledge and teaching with them so that they can find that inner liberation.
Does your family do TM? You have children, David? I remember you mentioned.
Yeah, I have one daughter. Yes, everybody in my family practiced TM. My wife and I and my daughter, but my siblings as well, and most of my siblings' spouses, and many of my nieces and nephews, and my mother was a TM practitioner before she passed on. So we're very fortunate that we are, 3 generations, and I hope soon, I don't know, be able to be grandfather or something like that, or granduncle, and teaching a 4th generation.
Oh, that's awesome. And that all started with you? Were you the first one that started?
Yeah, in my family, I was the first. Yeah.
And obviously they saw the difference in you, and that got them involved, I would assume, because if you turned out, anything less than grand.
Well, actually, funny that you'd bring that up. I would say that I would have to thank my family, in particular my mother, for ensuring that I stuck with this. I learned TM, and to me it was just the greatest thing since sliced bread, kind of thing. But
did it help you in university?
I'm sorry?
TM? Did it help you in university? Because you did this in high school. Did it help you? Did you
Well, now you're asking an embarrassing question. I'm a high school dropout, basically.
oh, that was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you come across, and the way you speak, and so on. I just assumed that.
Well, I fully expected, and I was brought up that way to say, you have to take advanced post-secondary education and whatnot. My mother, even when she passed on, still had expectations and hopes that her son would be a doctor.
That's the Asian, her parent. My parents, same thing. To this day, my mom would love for me to go back to university and be a doctor.
Exactly. So I was brought up to be that, and I applied for and was accepted in pre-med, but I chose to go off and study with Maharishi to teach TM first. And so I did that, returned.
Well, there's nothing embarrassing, David. The fact that you are accepted, in pre-med, I mean, that says it all. So that's amazing.
Doesn't mean I would have survived.
Oh, I'm sure you would have with the meditation at least.
Yeah, I'm sure it would have helped tremendously, but it wasn't. The other thing about you're asking the benefits is when you settle into this pure abstract sense of self and being, when you come out, you have a much clearer, deeper, truer sense of who you are as an individual and what your destiny in life is and what your pursuits are and how to be true to yourself. So instead of going back to university, I taught TM for a year or two and then decided, okay, now I have to go to university. And by this time I thought, well, maybe I'll study physics instead of health sciences. And so I applied, and they said, you can't apply for university at the end of September. This year has started. So, well, it's all right. I have no problem. I'll catch up or whatnot, because I'm very comfortable with math and physics. That was my thing in high school, and actually in a gifted program for those fields of study. Sent them my transcripts, and they go, "Oh, we'll take you." So I went down and to University of Waterloo. Went to the admissions door, and I couldn't open the door. And I go, what the heck? They told me to come at a certain time. Now the door is not open. It's still locked. So in frustration, I just walked away. And my buddy who had dropped me there said, what are you doing? I said, well, maybe it's not in the cards.
It's a sign.
It's a sign from the heavens to go to university and study physics, as much as I like the subject. And he goes, I said, because the door is locked, I couldn't open it. They told me to come at this time, and they're not there. The door's locked. So I get in the car, and so driving away, he looks back and he sees other people approaching the door, and they pull open the door. It opened outward, and I was trying to push it inward. And he goes, but hey, and I go, never mind, too late. Too late.
Wow.
So I then decided I would continue teaching TM and also make a living by just being creative, by starting a business and being an entrepreneur. And so I was very fortunate to be able to be a successful entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. Several businesses started and sold and this and that. And also continue with my vocation, not a livelihood, but a vocation, if you want to distinguish it between the two, as a teacher of Transcendental Meditation. And never regret any of it, because that is being true to oneself. That was the thing. Being a doctor was, my mother's desire, not necessarily mine.
Exactly.
The study of something like physics is an interest, but not necessarily a vocation or a livelihood. Teaching TM is my vocation. Business, entrepreneurship, was my livelihood. And I'm been very fortunate and very comfortable with that. And most people that I teach TM to find these little things that occur once they begin this practice, and they transcend, they experience themselves in their essence. When they come out, that expression becomes truer to them as a unique individual. And only you can know what that is. Not even your mother can know.
Yeah.
Right? Not your friends, not your family, not your parents. Only you know what is true to yourself. And you have that duty and obligation to discover that and to unfold that. And that's what this technique can offer. It offers all those health benefits that we were talking about as well. You erase these impressions, and not only in the mental level, But on a physiological level, when the mind settles like that, the body follows suit and gets into a deep state of rest and relaxation. In that deep state of rest and relaxation, the body's able to restore, rejuvenate, revitalize in ways that cannot even be accomplished during sleep. Sleep is absolutely essential for a human being, 6-8 hours every day, every 24-hour cycle, in order for the body to restore, rejuvenate, and the brain to reorganize and clean up and all that sort of stuff. Our TM practice gives us yet a different experience that is, I would say, more profound and deeper, and you'd probably agree in terms of experience, and you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And that allows the physiology of the nervous system to restore, rejuvenate, and to build physical health, to deal with the physical abnormalities that occur just from the wear and tear of everyday life.
So let me ask you this, David. I could sit here and speak to you for the next 4 hours. I'm enjoying this so much, and I'm getting a lot more out of it than I thought I would, because you're just getting me present to why I'm doing this and how much further I could go with this. Just stick with it. Now, how can people? Actually, my first question. What keeps you going? Why do you keep doing this? Number one, because you've been a successful entrepreneur. You don't need to do this. You could go buy a sailboat and travel the world and let someone else do it. Why do you do it?
My wife won't come with me on the sailboat.
Okay.
My friends who all wanted to do that too when we were younger some of them passed on and some of them are still here, and say, not anymore, David. We're not going to go sailing around the world. We're a little long in the tooth for that. Yeah, so I won't, because I'd have to go alone.
Okay. So if you can answer why you're doing this, and then finally, how can people get involved or take the course? If you can touch on those two things, that would be awesome.
Thanks for asking that question about why. And I think, every teacher has their own individual reasons. And for me, it goes right to the very heart of it from when I learned TM. Why did I become a teacher, or choose to become a teacher while still in high school? Well, it was part of my personal journey, if you will. I was looking for this. I was looking for this at a very young age. By the time
when you say looking for this, what do you mean? You were looking for peace of mind, or
looking for enlightenment, looking for truth, looking for purpose in life that would be worthy of life itself, to be able to contribute to make the world a better place.
And you were doing this at high school? You weren't interested in girls?
Actually, I started my journey much younger than high school.
Wow, that's amazing.
Personally, you were talking about religion before and so forth. I can't tell you exactly how and why, because our family was not particularly religious Christian sort of thing. My father passed away when I was very young, at a young age. I was 3, and I had 4 other siblings, 2 older and 2 younger, and I was in the middle. But by the time I was 7 or so, I was consumed by world news. I was
Wow.
reading Time magazine cover to cover, Newsweek cover to cover, everything, and following all the developments that are taking place in the Middle East with, the conflicts there, and the Suez Canal, and the Cold War, and all of that kind of.
Were you a genius child or something?
Just a curious one, I suppose. And I figured, I saw so much injustice as a child, growing up, in this country, in Northern Ontario, as a visible minority in the 50s and 60s, that I believe there had to be something better
And by the way, because it's a podcast, well, I'll be doing a YouTube as well, YouTube channel, but it's a podcast. People will be wondering, David Shah, visible minority. So you might want to touch on that.
Yeah. Well, if it's on a YouTube, you can see I'm a
That's
visible
right.
minority.
That's right. For the podcasters.
Yeah, the audio, not so much. It's an odd story. I mean, the name is a reflection of Canadian history, where names are anglicized correctly and incorrectly, and that's my father's surname in Cantonese, in Toisan, is Jin in Toisan, or Yun in Cantonese. It's got nothing to do with Shaw.
Okay.
But when he arrived on the boat, as they say, fresh off boat kind of thing, they looked at his name, and in Chinese as he expressed it, and they hadn't heard of Yun or Jin, depending on which dialect. What they saw as Chinese names in 1915 or 16 or something like that, when he came over, was Lum, Wang, Wang, Chan, Chin, like that, Li, those handful of Chinese surnames that represents 40% of the population.
That's right.
Like Singh, like that.
Exactly.
But here is this one that we're in the bottom 2 percentile of surname commonality in the Han Chinese ethnicity. So they just looked at it and go, what? And his given name was Yan Guak So. So in Chinese, it's the other way around. Your surname comes first, your middle name in the middle, and then your given name.
Gotcha.
And Guak So, and so they made his name Shou, Show.
Okay.
And then later on, my father, well, nobody has the name Shou, but there is a name, Shaw, so he had it corrected to Shaw, and that's how we became Shaw. Is an Anglo-Irish name, really. But
yeah.
There's nothing other than East Asian.
Yeah, it's funny, when I came for the introductory course, TM course, it was David. I'm looking for David Shaw, and you showed up. I was like, who's this guy?
But I'm glad to be happy as we're chatting here to say that I'm a visible minority, and oddly enough, one who can pass for all sorts.
Yeah.
With First Nations people, most of them just assume that I am.
That's right.
Tibetans assume I'm Tibetan. When I'm at a Japanese restaurant, they would speak to everybody at the table, my family members and so forth, in English, and turn to me and speak Japanese.
Yeah.
Koreans think I'm Japanese, and so forth. So I certainly have had that situation where people walk in, look me straight in the eye, and go, "Oh, I'm supposed to meet with David Shaw." I go, "Right here, standing in front of you."
So, and the intro, you don't do the intro anymore, correct? I mean, if people want to...
if they want to learn, yes, as soon as we reopen, we'll be doing intros in person.
You don't do Zoom intros or anything like that?
When we reopen, we'll start doing some Zoom intros and stuff like that. It's not something that I'm practiced in. It's so we'll start that when the pandemic is over, and do more Zoom intros, so people, that first step can be very easy. They can just come and hear more about it and see, well, is this for me now? I would say it's for everybody, but it's not necessarily for everybody right at this very moment in their lives. It's when they're ready and wanting to make a commitment to a practice. It's a technique, but its value is as a practice, twice a day, sort of thing.
Well, that intro really helped me, because that intro, it was non-committal. I mean, it was a free intro, and it was a couple of hours, and I was able to get all my questions answered by you, and that really helped me.
What it is and what it isn't, and that is often as important as what it is is to dispel all the notions of what it isn't. Oh, I have to sit cross-legged like this, or I have to become a vegetarian, or I have to change my religion, or I have to adopt a lifestyle or a philosophy. And we really get into a clearer understanding of what it is and what it isn't, and why it's actually distinct and different than most other meditative practices. And then the person can decide, is this the one I choose to learn and to commit to as a practice. And oftentimes the most salient point in that intro, and we call it the prep seminar as well, as we prepare to learn, is something that you don't read much about in terms of TM, because you hear about it as a mental technique, and it gives you a deep state of rest, and you have all these physiological benefits and these mental health benefits and so forth, is when I talk about the very nature of the principles and technique of transcendental meditation, and try to distinguish it for people from contemplative practices where we think, what is the nature of life, to be or not to be, and all that kind of stuff that moves the mind across the horizontal plane of meaning, and different from the fixed focus type of practice, which are concentration and moving the mind to a focal point. Our experience of transcendental meditation is experiencing the vertical plane of the mind, not the horizontal plane, which we're doing right now, which we do all day long as we engage in thought and thinking process. Nor is it this concentrated focal point. It's about experiencing the subtlest level of thought and transcending. But we do it in a very particular way that has a kind of secondary benefit that most people aren't aware of and maybe take for granted. I'll describe it this way. I was out with my wife this few years ago, and somewhere along the Danforth, and she was shopping, and I don't have a lot of patience for shopping. I'm one of these guys who wants something, goes and gets it, and that's it. I don't look at stuff that I'm not going to get, sort of thing. My wife is the exact.
You know why I'm laughing, by the way? I'm laughing because, I have this idea of you being this guy that's totally Zen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's refreshing to know that you can still have no patience for certain things.
Yeah, a shopping mall is, the Danforth is not so bad because you're outside. So she's in the shop. I walk through and I do this walk the aisles thing, and then I'm done. It takes just moments. And she's browsing. She's doing this. I'm sitting outside, leaning against one of those potted things, where a tree grows out of. And I'm seeing people walk down the street coming in my direction, and they're going to a yoga studio, a hot yoga studio. How do I know that? How do I pick those out? Well, those are people carrying a little yoga mat with them. I see them coming down the street, and they're just walking casually and normally. But as they get closer and closer to the yoga studio, the posture changes, the stride changes, and you see, instead of just sauntering along like this, they start to walk a little more upright, a little more purposeful, head held a little higher, because now they are approaching the studio and they're going there to do their good thing, their hot yoga for the day.
Interesting.
So you see that and you go, okay, intention, it's a good thing. Purpose, it's a good thing, very good thing, these things. And see people start striding purposefully and into it and up the stairs. And I thought, oh, that's cool. You're going to do your thing. It's not different than going to the gym and doing your Pilates or your spin class. There's purpose there. And I see the class coming out. Now, the class coming out is different than the class going in, because now the class coming out are all kind of greasy haired kind of thing, because they did their hot yoga thing. They sweated through it. And so hair is all kind of pulled back and slick and whatnot. But you also see something different in their posture. There is an uprightness, but it's very relaxed. It's not affected. It's not this purposeful intent to walking. It's just very natural, more graceful and comfortable as they're coming out. And you can see the face is brighter and the eyes are clearer. And you go, yeah, they did their thing and it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, what's interesting that I notice here that's different than a group of people who finish their TM practice in a class, in a group meditation and whatnot. There's something different. And I'm going, it's all good. It's all very similar, but it's different. What's different? These people going in, these people coming out. And I go, yeah, here's the difference. They were proud because they went into that hot studio and with effort, and sometimes great effort, they worked those postures and they did that and they stretched it further and like that. And they withstood that heat and discomfort of the heat and all of that. And so they were proud of the effort that they put in to produce the result, which is good, which is about the building of our individuality, the sense of self-worth. Right? When you are at the TM center and you sit through a group meditation, at the end of group meditation, people are happy, smiling, maybe quieter, more centered, etc. But there's no expression of pride, which is very interesting. There's more of an expression or an exuding.
The word that comes to me is peace.
Peace, humility,
yeah,
gratitude. And that is a direct result of the mechanics of the technique itself. When you do something with great effort, you take credit because you did it. You did it with great effort. You know, it's like those Peloton commercials you see everywhere these days, you know. You say, I crushed it, you know. Yes, you did through great effort. So you take credit because you accomplished it through effort. Our TM technique, as you know, is effortless.
That's right.
You just sit, you close your eyes, you just start. And the very nature of the mind, the very nature of mind and body, the very nature of our physiology, the quality of the mantra, the technique itself, it just happens. And we have this lovely, lovely experience. And when we come out, there is no pride because we didn't do it through effort. The technique was effortless. And so we feel a greater sense of humility and we feel a greater sense of gratitude, which means it wasn't individuality that we were directly cultivating. It was our universality. And we feel grateful for that. And so the heart grows. And the heart grows. When we're grateful, the heart grows. We're able to accept more and we're able to give more. And that's sort of the secret, I would say, the secret benefit of Transcendental Meditation, which we haven't got much research to show for that, because that's not what science researches. They reach it mental health, physical health, this and that. And techniques are all about, I went on a 10-day Vipassana retreat. I was silent for 10 days, me, or I made it to day 8 or whatever, right? It's pride, because that is the definition of individuality, self-worth through effort. Mm-hmm. This technique, its real benefit, its real value is at that subtle level of heart, where we have more humility, more gratitude, more openness to life, to be able to embrace everything, to be able to experience it, embrace it, and share it. So we invite everyone to learn more about TM. People start for all kinds of reasons. I've had people come just for high blood pressure. They don't care about anything else. So look, I don't know what your mumbo jumbo is, David, but my doctor sent me here because the pills don't work, and if I don't do this, I'll die. So they learn, and their blood pressure improves. And as far as they're concerned, TM is a high blood pressure relief valve. And for someone who's been traumatized, you just need to be free of that. And I've instructed a lot of women who've been in abusive relationships and suffer for decades. And this practice of TM, a few days, a few weeks, and they're freed from that impression that's etched into their psyche. Finally, after decades, after therapy, after medication, after all that struggle to deal with the symptom, now we have this experience that deals with it at the most profound root level. So come learn, find out more, ask your questions, and it doesn't matter why.
So how can sorry, repeat that again?
People come to learn for all kinds of reasons. It doesn't matter why, what the impetus is, what the motivator is. It's a technique that allows you to realize your full potential, your full capacity, and all those negative aspects, those health and other negative issues that we contend with, tend to fall by the wayside because we've introduced the element of consciousness. I'll close it this way by using something I learned from Mahesh Yogi himself. He said, you can walk into a dark room, and in that dark room, there's nothing but problems. There's a chair, there's a table, there's a lamp, there's all sorts of things in that room, but they're experienced as problems because you crash into the wall, bang your knee on the chair or this or that. He goes, you can deal with it at that level by pacing it out, memorizing where the objects are and this and that to be able to maneuver in this dark room. He said, or you just turn on the light. You know, and the chair is not a problem. It's just a chair. The table's not a problem. It's just a table. The lamp is not a problem. It's just a lamp. By introducing the second element, introducing light, and here we're talking about the light of consciousness, our own consciousness, and all those things will tend to fall by the wayside because we've introduced the light of consciousness. And that's why you're asking earlier why I became a TM teacher and why I continue to teach and share this technique. It's because I was looking for, as a very young child, solutions to the ills of society, which I witnessed, you know, whether it's what I experienced as a visible minority, or even, for instance, what I witnessed as, quote, my people dealing with other people. Like, you know, back up north, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of discrimination by Chinese restaurant owners against First Nations people. They wouldn't serve, quote, Indians in their restaurants.
The Native Indians.
Yeah, Native Indians. They thought they're troublemakers, they're drunken Indians and whatnot. And the worst thing, and this is, you know, this is history and this is real, that an older Chinese person would say to a kid who's misbehaving, if you don't behave, we're going to throw you away to the reservation with the savages.
Wow.
And that, you know, we see that every culture has all this stuff.
For sure.
And
for sure.
I saw that as a young child, and I saw following the news and the problems in the Middle East and this and that. Well, there's got to be a solution. So I sought the solution in religion and started going to church every Sunday by myself as a little kid. My mother supported and encouraged that. Nobody else went. I just went by myself until I was disillusioned enough at the age of 12, saying, no, it isn't that. It isn't this religion thing, because there was all kinds of, you know, hypocrisies and problems there, you know, because I would see my Sunday school teacher on Friday and Saturday night at my older brother's restaurant, drunk, and then on Sunday he was my Sunday school teacher. You know, you know, as a child you go, hold on a second here. There's some inconsistencies here, and I moved from there into studying politics and the social sciences, and embedded myself into communism, and I'd read the Communist Manifesto by the time I was 12, and Che Guevara's writing on guerrilla warfare, and Mao Zedong's Little Red Book. After a couple of years of exploring that, you know, it wasn't going to happen through socio-economics, not through politics. And I started studying psychology, and I started studying spiritual practices. And that's what I mean by arriving at this. I was looking for this. And my first experience of TM was so obvious that this was the experience, and this is what I could and should spend my life sharing, because it is so foundational. And as an instructor of thousands of people over these many decades, I've seen how powerful this influence is, how transformative it has been for so many people. And it becomes a responsibility, a duty. Sometimes I'd rather be sailing, but but there's an obligation and a duty to share something that is this significant and transformative. So I continue to do that. And we invite everybody to come learn more, ask your questions, and you'll find that very simple, frank discussions with our instructors as to what TM is, what it isn't, what it takes to learn, what kind of commitment to yourself it involves. And for most people, it takes a moment to cross a certain threshold to think that, oh, I'm going to start a practice. Actually, I came to learn a technique, but I'm learning a life practice. And when you learn the practice of TM, the technique of TM, you do it 20 minutes twice a day for the rest of your life. And there are very few things that one does for the rest of their life twice a day. I mean, we eat, we sleep, we do. But what else does a person do? It's,
That's right.
There are very few things. And most people are quite surprised when they learn the technique of TM and the practice of TM, that it's so natural to integrate it into their routine. Get up in the morning, first thing you do, meditate to prepare yourself for the activity of the day. Towards the end of the day, you sit and meditate to prepare yourself for the activity of the late afternoon, early evening with your family and so forth. And it just becomes your practice, your pursuit in life to be the best you that you can be.
That's awesome. That's well said, David. So to end this, where can people get more information? A website or anything?
The website is ca.tm.org.
Okay.
ca.tm.org. And from there, you'll find more information, and you can connect to the local center and the local teachers and whatnot. And you'll find out where the introductory sessions are. And there's no obligation. Come. Find out more. There's no pressure. It's not a sales pitch. TM teachers are teachers. They're not salespeople. And you might actually find that it's kind of a negative sell. You go, wait, aren't you supposed to persuade me?
And it's a nonprofit organization.
Yes, we operate like an NGO, a non-governmental organization globally. And it's in some countries, in some places, it's structured as a charity. In Canada, it's structured as a not-for-profit educational organization. And so our purpose is to teach this technique and practice, and to maintain the structure of an organization, to be able to support the practitioners, and to be able to continue to teach people forward and onward. So when you learn, you have the disposal of a global teaching organization to support you for a lifetime, because it's a life practice.
Gotcha. Well, David, thank you so much. Like I said, I've gotten so much from this conversation, and it's great that there are people like you dedicating their life to something as important as this. And yeah, I can't wait to be in a situation like yourself, because I'm an entrepreneur, to be able to do this. Because the more benefits I get, the more I want the world to know about this. And that's why I invited you on this podcast. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. And it's been my privilege to chat, and we'll get together and chat also in person when we have our group meditations back up and running at the TM Center when we reopen post-pandemic. I look forward.
Yes, here's to the world getting back to normal real soon.
Yes, real soon. Better
Awesome.
than normal.
That's right. There you go. Better than normal. Well, thank you so much, and have a blessed day, and we'll be in touch. Okay?
Great. Thanks very much.
All right. Take care, David.